Hey guys, this is Super Gamer 61499 here. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. Uh, Today, I figured I'll try to make another editorial type video. And I know you might be asking me, oh, well, what happened to that? What happened to that City Hunter project that I was alluding to? Well, unfortunately, I've been mostly procrastinating on it, writing notes every now and again and stuff about it, but I haven't I haven't really done the video editing or anything with that yet. Don't worry though, I do plan on trying to make the video because it's not going to be like a full-blown City Hunter retrospective. I don't plan on doing anything like that. Mostly this is just about this is just mostly about trying to get trying to get the facts right and the editing right, so I don't sound like a complete doofus talking about some songs in one of my favorite animes that I've seen recently. Uh, so I guess with that out of the way, um, I'm sure you've probably heard recently on the news or on social media like Blue Sky or Twitter, physical disc production for PlayStation and Xbox will be ending January 2028 for new games releasing on PlayStation consoles. I know a lot of people are quite upset that they're upset that physical media is dying, that it's been dying for years, and that basically this is the death of ownership. But I want to explain something quick before we start. I don't believe physical games. I don't believe physical games are true ownership. I believe true ownership starts when, you can use the software for whatever personal use you want, and B, that you can reverse engineer it and make cool stuff with it. I want to be clear though, this is not an attack on physical game collectors or anyone who still collects games. Like, I know a lot of buds, like my friend Joe on Discord. He'll collect a lot of shit, and he's a rad dude. I don't even know if he watches these videos, but I know this has certainly sparked an interesting conversation. I will say though, before we start, I also need to say I am someone who is critical of capitalism. And I know this might be a bit uncomfortable for some people to say, but I don't think capitalism exists in isolation when it comes to this topic of video game ownership. In fact, I think it's like the perfect example that we should be more critical. We should be more critical of what game companies do with our video games, the things we purchased, and taking them down or removing the functionality offline, or like the listing, like even just the fact older games can't, like, their discs can rot is a bad thing. uh I might as well also start with the definition of capitalism, because I think it'll be important for what we're going to talk about. you know Even if we're not going to go full blown economic or political socio theory, we're just going to talk about the three definitions of capitalism quick. An economic system in which the means of production and distribution are privately or corporately owned, and development occurs through the accumulation and reinvestment of profits gained in a free market. That is the first definition. The second definition: an economic system based on predominantly private, individual, or corporate investment in an ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange of goods and wealth. contrasted with socialism or especially communism, in which the state has the predominant role in the economy. And then there's the third one, a socio-economic system based on private property rights, including the private ownership of resources or capital, with economic decisions made largely through the operation of a market unregulated by the state. I think all of these kind of apply to differing degrees of our current system, but I think of the phrase through the operation of a market unregulated by the state. And why does that matter? Why does that matter in the context of what we're talking about? Well, ownership and capitalism do not coexist. The way the law is set up, the companies the companies in charge or the IP holders or the people writing our laws were being lent a book or a movie or a license to a video game or a license to a TV show. And if at any moment, say the service goes down or things go haywire and they delist it, then you stop owning the piece of media. And obviously this doesn't apply to all digital or physical services. Like GOG, Good Old Games, is pretty good about, you can download over and over, install over and over your favorite games like Doom, Quake, Deus Ex, and the like. Forever, theoretically, as long as the software works on your modern computer. Or Just USA with the lewd visual novels. Like I don't want to think of a world where I can't play Opie Academy because, oh, God forbid, I don't know, God forbid the game got delisted due to, a moral panic or anything like that. Or, like, there's so many examples of, like, the idea of ownership that should exist in video games, the framework that we have used. Really, the whole idea of a license is baked into capitalism itself. Because art is not owned by the people in the legal sense. If the government doesn't step in and the company instead decides how copyright should work, then you could be taken to court, the MCA takedowns, you could be sued, you could be sued for like trying to rebirth a PC game or whatever. Well, like, regardless of any of that, companies just in general, best they're indifferent and they'll let you use your game however you want. At worst, they are actively hostile. They write EULAs. They write these very dogmatic, very questionable user license agreements that can't be held up under a court of law. You might be asking, wouldn't physical games be able to abide these kind of things? What I say to that is not really. Yeah, you think about Battleborn, or you think about online only games like Overwatch 2, or even just games that require an online check like Destiny 2 for certain things. You have to ask yourself, do you really own those games or do you own a license? Because that disc can mean jack shit, really, with realistically what you can do with that. And I kind of think, like in a lot of things in life, and I know it's gonna annoy some people, but I don't believe things exist in isolation. I think whether or not you hate capitalism or you're sort of indifferent or you like it, you have to admit everything that a lot of countries and companies and the way they operate, the reality is that we do not exist in isolation to these laws or what's exactly the right to own something. Earlier, just earlier, like yesterday, I watched a video where someone mentioned that Sony could remove your whole entire movie, digital library for whatever reason, and there's no legal recourse to get it back. And I think to myself, that's fucked up. That should be a, that should be addressed in a court of law, and have there should be better consumer rights to protect us. But alas, in our current capitalism system, that's not really a thing right now. That people have to do the job of preserving art themselves, legally or illegally. Doesn't even really matter to me. I, I might as well give some examples of how companies at their very worst are very anti-consumer. They take down lots of websites. They take down lots of fan projects. I still remember MU Paradise used to have a ton of ROMs that you could download for any game that you could ever want dumped on the internet until Nintendo decided to sue the website owners, and they couldn't do it anymore. The games were gone. There was nothing you could do. It all just vanished in the blink of an eye. Or, the whole thing that started the Stop Killing Games movement. The Crew. Ubisoft never got rid of the online check to see, like, if you could still play the game even after it stopped being supported. And that game might as well be a paperweight in your Steam library, or your PS4 or whatever. Or hell, even PC fan projects like AM2R, Silent Hill PT PC ports, the Club Penguin fan servers, even like the Electronic Software Association arguing and lying in Congress about Minecraft and old Call of Duty servers being illegal is insane. It's insane. It's insane to even compare them to a black market. Private servers are not the black market, but these companies don't care. These organizations don't care. They think they're better than us. They they think they can belittle, take away our rights, actively undermine what it means to have ownership. And to that, I say, these people are disgusting. You know, like, I hate them. I hate companies. I know most people don't want to hear it, but like, companies are just disgusting. Organizations are disgusting. At least ones like Electronic Software Association. I think it's disgusting how corrupt they are. And the fact that we even have to have this conversation about what it means to own video games is crazy. Yeah, like, even the Video Game History Foundation, they couldn't even get a DMCA exemption from the U.S. Copyright Office and the Electronic Software Association. They couldn't even like get an exemption to, like, like, look into games, dig into games code, figure out what made the developer for this tick, or any of that. They were just given the boots of, like, corporate bullshit. Really, it's all corporate bullshit. You know, you have to think so often. So many modern games needing to be cracked, like, say, the Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1+2 HD remake on Fit Girl, or the countless, the countless crack groups that have to get rid of de novo And like they have to figure out ways to get through the online checks. You have to ask yourself, why do people have to do this in order to play video games? Or they own video games? Or even the idea, even the idea of true ownership, it comes from cracking retro games. You think about all the PlayStation 1 games like Tekken 3 and all that, Spyro 3, Spyro 1, Crash 2, Final Fantasy 7, Chrono Cross, Crash Bash, you name it. Why do you have to crack these games in order to truly own them? It's kind of crazy when you think about it, Like even the fact that so many times consumers have to do the dirty work of needing to preserve the things they care about. It really should tell you how bad things have gotten. It's why I don't get people that throw $60 at online only games or games as a service, or that whole idea of, oh, it's fine if some games are like theme park rides. It's so anti art. It's so disgusting. And I'd like to say in a vacuum that none of this should really exist. And I agree it shouldn't. But the reality is, in our current political system and other countries' political systems, ownership ownership in general isn't really valued enough. A lot of these bureaucrats or whatever that had they had dinners or whatever with Video Games Europe or Electronic Software Association are corrupt. They're corrupt bureaucrats that do not give a shit about video games. They do not give a shit about what you love, and they are an enemy. They are an enemy of your rights. I know it sounds extreme, and I know, I know it would sound to a lot of people emotional, but that's the truth. I I wouldn't mind capitalism if it did just exist only in its original purpose, for goods and services. You trade me, like say I give you money for bread, here's money for bread, I own bread. That's how capitalism should be, in my opinion. Give you money for this, I get this, and I own it. No one can take away food or artificially scarce the quantity of bread or chicken or yogurt or banana. I just I just own the food. But the reality is none of this exists in isolation. And I know you might say, well, games are not a need, they are just a want. But I don't care for that argument. Companies companies in general will leverage that type of argument. They leverage the lack of ownership. That's why I think they're trying to kill off That's why I think they're trying to kill off physical games. Not because, oh, it's more expensive to make the game on the disc, but because I think that the way some games might come in the incoming years, I think they'll be tied to a server. I think certain AAA games will be tied to a server. You have to do DRM checks in order to know, do you own the game? Do you own the game? Do you not own the game? If not, your license has been invalidated, and it's insane, really. Just even compared to 20 years ago, when you could own a game like Unreal Tournament 2004, because those licenses weren't as good back then. They couldn't protect as much of the company's interest. But now with all these online DRM checks, companies are glad to abuse them. They are glad to abuse and try to, like they try to attack say Vimslayer or Fanworks all the time that they think are violating their DMCA rights and their copyright protections and their IP rights. It's disgusting, you know. Maybe you might have a company like Valve every once in a while that is very respectful towards fan projects. And you have Sega that at least doesn't seem to take much issues with Sonic fan games like Sonic Triple Trouble 16-bit. But for all those companies, there's a ton of Nintendos and EAs and the like that. They'll take their fans to court if they need to, if they dare to make a fan project or a fan server. Like there's tons of fan projects, heck, like tons of Pokemon fan projects that have gotten taken down over the years, like Pokemon Uranium. And I mentioned the Silent Hill PT PC port or PC fan remake example, but like even the Link's Awakening PC port, they were, the fan project, they were told to cease production, and it's really gross that I think it's really gross that we accept this shit as the norm, and I don't care what people say. It's so anti-consumer the way these companies behave. Taking down fan servers for Club Penguin, or I'm sure there's probably even I'm sure there's even more examples out there. The WoW vanilla servers before WoW Classic was reintroduced. There's got to be a ton of fan servers for old MMOs that do not have company permission, but are the only reason you can play certain games still, like Fantasy Star Online. And with that Vim's Lair thing, they were forced to take down certain games because the Electronic Software Association, being the corporate shills and pricks they are, they were they forced them to pull down certain games like Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots, certain Nintendo games like Mario World, certain I'm sure there were even other examples like, from Activision. Like probably I'm sure you can't get certain Call of Duty games. And there's like countless other things that, for whatever reason, thanks to the Electronic Software Association, they made them take it down. When really, that website and a ton of other websites, have been preserving games for years more effectively than any of that physical disc, more than any physical disc can realistically. Yeah. And I also say, not just because of, oh, well, there's a baked in license agreement or copy protection even in a disc, but also because a ton of those games will eventually get disc wrapped. So it's worth noting that too. Uh, the thing with piracy and why I believe it does preserve games better is, and I don't know if I might have mentioned it before, that it also it's also the only leverage to like say copy a game, crack a game, make copies of a game over and over without like the legal headache. Oh well, I have to pay Nintendo every single time to be able to play, let's say, Super Mario World or Earthbound, or whatever, or pay a repro guy or whatever. I don't think any of that shit with cartridges and discs are preserving games. They break down, they stop working eventually. There's a rarity issue with press disc games on PlayStation 1, Saturn, GameCube. You know, there's a ton of lesser known games, like, the Rule of Roses, and there's a ton of like lower budget games that never had a ton of quantity of games pressed on a disc. Go Go Hypergrind is one of my personal examples because I grew up with that game. It's one of the least known games that I can think of. You know, thanks to emulation and thanks to people dumping the ROM online for that game, I can now play that game as much as I want. And I think about all the times the FitGirl repack, they cracked a ton of Denofu games with that system. Ton of a ton of like Yakuza games, Sonic games, Minecraft, Bedrock Edition, Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1+2, probably GTA 5, like the Uncharted PC ports, Spider-Man, Marvel Spider-Man, Spider-Man Miles Morales, the Batman Arkham games. Like these are a ton of games. These are a ton of games people love, respect, and adore. Whether or not I care about all these games as a whole is an entirely irrelevant conversation. The point is that people can still play those. Or hell, when Zune lost the files, the Toho, like the older Tohos from like 1 to 8 or even further, fans 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 came to the rescue. We have Toho community patchers for games like the original embodiment of the Scarlet Devil, Perfect Cherry Blossom, The Imperishable Night, Phantasmagoria Flower View, and there's a ton of these older Toho games, even on PC 98, that you can't just buy on Steam or GOG or wherever because Zoom lost the files, and rather than him taking down those projects, he allows websites like Memoriana Shrine his blessings, really. And I think every day that there is a man like Zoom, every once in a while in the game's creative space, because Zune is the fucking Chad, and Zune will let you make a ton of Toho fan projects as long as you follow his guidelines. It's pretty fair. There's so many times with other game companies like Activision, Ubisoft, and the like, they'll actively write in their end user license agreements that you do not own the game, you do not own it, and that we could take it away at any time. And it's so gross and disgusting. And even just the fact that monetarily, companies see no incentive or any type of incentive, even from the law to just say, hey, maybe video games shouldn't be shut down the moment they quote unquote sunset, man. But then you'll get chuds like Pirate Software that'll make an embarrassment out of themselves, trying to make Ross Scott out to look like a fucking moron when he's a fucking moron himself. He doesn't know shit, and he's just a fucking nepo baby pretending that he has a leg in this race. Really, the guy can't even finish his one game he's been working on for years, and he is emblematic of the mindset of modern capitalism. That these companies are just shitty. They're shitty. The big corporations don't value the customer, and the customer has to fight back and try to get the things they love to actually work. It's insane, really. It's just insane that rather than just even making an offline patch or release server binaries or not argue and lie in Congress about Minecraft's private servers are like the black market, these companies will monetarily take advantage of you, nickel and dime you, work with the government, and you have to say to yourself, why do I support these companies? What do they do for me as the customer? The customer may not always be right about every little detail, but the customer has a right to not support it. Okay, and that's how I look at it. You know, these EULAs, these PC PC projects getting taken down every day, like the Shin Megami Tensei MMO, tons of tons and tons of Nintendo fan projects like the Zelda 1 fan remake getting taken down years ago, the countless online checks for games that require DRM. You really gotta ask yourself, like, why do I support any of this shit if you do, I think the reason ultimately why you should care is because this will affect you whether or not you realize that. You will always lose access to certain games. If the company, for whatever reason, decided removing a DRM check or even just making sure a game has an offline patch is not the priority, yeah? Like you think about it all the time, and it makes you kind of hate big companies and the bureaucrats that won't wrangle in these big companies like Activision and the like. They just kind of like, I don't know. That's why I think lobbying is one of the worst things to ever happen to politics. Period. I think anyone that respects video games as an art form, even if you're not deeply into this passionate topic, like even if you're not as passionate as me, if you think video games are art, then you should understand taking away video games like they're an amusement park ticket ride or whatever is anti-art. It is anti-art. And I don't care, I hate to say it, but you know, we we should have higher standards. I know I threw in a lot in this video just alone, but like just with what we talked about alone. But there are positives to this situation, and there are like plenty of ways I think you can get ownership back of your games. The first one is obviously piracy. Zip your games, pirate your games, make sure they have backup copies of your games. Don't just rely on the disc, because the disc could one day arrive, and you know, one day you may not be able to replay a game like, I don't know, say like Sonic Heroes or SSX or Persona 5. You should back up those games however you can. Back them up, have them on your drives. Be like me, have like backup digital copies of certain games. Uh, there are also other ones you should do. If you want to have your ownership back, don't support online only games or games as a service that do not respect your time or your intelligence or whatever. Do not support games that are online in the cloud only, because you're going to get majorly fucked later down the road, and you will not own that game anymore. Like, think about all the online only games that have ceased to exist. You think about like Battleborn, or you think about PUBG. Like, is PUBG even a thing still? I don't even know. You have to think that, like, even within a couple days, that Sony took down a hero shooter, like a hero shooter within like just a few days. You know, and for anyone that knows, you should know by now that that really should tell you where we are in the state of the industry. You know, and another way I think you can get control of ownership back is also support projects that are P-comps, B-comps, PC fan versions. You should support so many projects because there's a ton of stuff out there in the current video game hobby programming and coding space. The Open Goal project for the first three Jack and Daxter games, the Mario 64 PC port, the Ocarina and Majora PC VComps and DComps, the GoldenEye 007 PC port, the Sonic Unleashed PC port, the Perfect Dark PC port. There's also the upcoming, whenever it comes out, the Paper Mario PC port, the Viva Pinata PC port for one of the DS games. I believe I could be wrong about that. The Mario Kart 64 PC port. There's a ton of stuff in the works. Oh, Bomberman 64 and Bomberman Hero as well, along with, Goemon 64. I guess, I just think about this all the time. I say, I'm really glad that PC ports, VComps, piracy exist. Because I think it's a nightmare how little our rights as a customer base, and let alone even just other customers, how little they're respected. You have to you just have to admire all the hard work and attention to detail each of these projects have been given. It's so hard work. Even just the fact, even outside of PC ports and recomps and decomps, think about emulation efforts from Dolphin, MGBA, Veneer, RPCS3. You have to think about all the efforts of even keeping Citra alive, or even Switch emulation alive with Project Eden. You just have to be like, you have to respect it because, again, companies won't really care to preserve these games. They won't. They might re-release some stuff, but let's face it, some of those versions might not even be the best way to play it in the first place. It just, I don't know. I also think about this. You should also ask, even if it might be difficult, you should ask your local politicians and your governments around the world to demand better consumer rights. It's not it's not fair that companies get to decide the rules on what is or what isn't ownership. What can be taken away at a given notice? What can be argued to be a license versus an actual product? It's sickening. It's sickening that we even have to fight against these big tiring companies. And it's not the first time nor the last time that we'll be ending up down this road. Remember Gloop versus Nintendo with the whole Game Genie thing? Even just the idea of a cheat code was considered unauthorized back in the 80s and the early 90s. Or Lean versus Sony. Lean couldn't even make a commercial emulator, without going to court first. And even though they technically won that battle, they lost in the sense that they went bankrupt. And even though Sony did give them jobs with the PS1 emulator for PS3, the point is that these companies these companies are ruthless. They are not your friends. You do not care about your rights, and they will, at a given notice, they will argue against your rights through lobbyists. That is entirely the reason why Electronic Software Association exists. I hate to sound like a salty bitch, really, about this whole thing, because I do love video games. And I could complain all day about how capitalism and the idea of companies in general have affected video game ownership negatively. I think it does suck. I think it does suck that people that aren't you or me, like people that listen to this video, we're the minority when it comes to critical thinking, huh? But, you know, even if even though there is the real possibility there will be a lot of game companies that will just try to make their games online only to circumvent piracy and all that, like stop people from cracking their games, push shitty de novo in games that, require online checks, we can still make a difference as a community, yeah? I care a lot. I grew up with video games ever since I was 5 or 6 years old. Literally, my first ever video game was my mom showing me Super Mario 1, Super Mario Brothers on the NES, whilst we played. And I thought about all those nostalgic memories, trying games like Namco Museum, Super Mario Brothers, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2, Super Metroid later on, Earthbound later on, Halo, um, Call of Duty. I think about a lot of those things, and they mean a lot to me. They are art. They have thematic meaning. They have value. If you cry to a video game, even if it wasn't intended by the developer, or you think about games in a different way from the original developer intention, or you just respect something so much that you feel the need to look up a documentary, or even just write a video about it, video games are art. I already I don't I don't think, like, honestly, I don't think people have to prove video games matter. The only thing people have to prove is we should be able to keep ownership of our purchases, because otherwise, you know, then what's the point? Like you like honestly, that's how I genuinely feel. Even if we have to circumvent all this disgusting and terrible like DRM checks, I think that it's necessary in order to preserve the art we care about. Just like how, preserving movies isn't just putting a movie in a disc or a Blu-ray and sticking it in your shelf. It also comes from making sure you can make backup copies to be able to commentate on the movie, discuss and think about the themes of a movie. What do you think of the movie? What did you get out of the movie? What is it you value about the movie? And why do you care about the movie so much? I think of video games in that similar way. It's a shame how it's a shame how it's a shame how we've gotten to this point. Like it's gotten so bad. And I guess it's not even to get into like, different versions, 1.0s, different ports, the fact that not all games run the exact same way through different console spheres. You just I don't know. I care about it so much. And I guess that's what makes me kind of anal about this topic, because like it just gets me all fired up that we just have to have this conversation in the first place, rather than it just being a guarantee that you own the game that you purchased. I guess for me, at the end of the day, I'll continue to play video games I'll continue to love video games. Even if AAA companies decide one day cloud only games is the way of the future, I won't buy into it. I just won't buy those kind of games. I won't buy games as a service. I won't buy games that require active online checks. I just won't buy any of it. You know, I think about it so often. Like, I even omitted certain stuff. Like, we could even get into the idea of remakes and how certain original versions of games based on a remake, like Silent Hill 2, are getting left to the wayside officially, whilst fans have to pirate the original Silent Hill 2 to get the original intended experience. And it's a shame, really, you know? It's a shame how things are. I hope I hope I hope through the Protect Our Games Act and that them talking about it to the EU Parliament. I hope Stop Killing Games does succeed, and I hope one day that I can grow up in a world where video games are a you know not specifically a right, a God given right, but we have the right to say, hey, I want to introduce this old game that I used to grow up with to my kids or my future grandkids or whatever, your girlfriend or your aunt or whatever. Like, it's if you have a will, you should have a way. I hope one day we can live in a better hope we can live in a better time period where capitalism is actually more regulated by the government, and it isn't just this constant sporadic amount of abuse from bureaucrats and liars liars from companies. Well, if you got this far to the end of the video, well, I'm glad. I hope you got something out of it, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry I haven't made a video in a while. Like I said, I haven't been the most motivated. Some days I feel a little depressed, but I'm hoping I'm hoping people got something out of this passionate, I guess a little rambly video. I tried writing some notes, but I don't know. It might still end up a little more unfocused, but I hope it's more focused than last time. Uh, with that said, I hope you all have a good day. And this is Glenn, Super Gamer 61499, signing out.